Nancy Cooper, a 34-year-old mother of two, was reported missing from her home in Cary, North Carolina on July 12, 2008. Nancy Lynn Rentz was born a twin in 1973 in Alberta, Canada. She loved arts, sports, and fashion and was known for her outgoing and vibrant personality. Nancy brought life into everything that she did and liked to embellish her stories. Her friends even started calling her stories nannerisms. In her 20s, Nancy owned a clothing boutique in Calgary and later worked for IBM, where she met Bradley Cooper in 1999. Brad, an IT engineer, was reserved and introverted, the complete opposite of Nancy's extroverted nature. Brad wasn't her normal type because she usually dated extroverted men. Nancy was initially drawn to Brad for his emotional and economic stability, especially after experiencing heartbreak in a previous relationship. Despite her attraction to more outgoing and adventurous personalities, Nancy chose Brad, believing he offered the security she desired since she was at a point in her life where she was ready to marry and have children. She talked about Brad with her sister and told her that she felt safer with him. When Brad told Nancy that he had accepted a job at Cisco Systems and would have to relocate to Cary, North Carolina, the two decided to marry. The couple got married in a small ceremony in October 2000 and moved from Calgary to Cary. Nancy's relocation to Cary marked a turning point in Nancy's life. She was unable to work due to visa restrictions and found herself dependent on Brad, both monetarily and emotionally. This sudden shift from an independent, self-sufficient woman to a housewife depending on her husband for all her needs left her feeling caged. Although Nancy later took up part-time work as a nanny, Brad still maintained strict control over the household finances. Nancy did not have any credit cards of her own, and she was not an authorized user on any of Brad's cards. Brad gave Nancy a weekly allowance of $300 and deducted all the extra money she earned from this amount. $300 wasn't enough, so Nancy would paint the homes of friends to get more money. Eventually, Brad got a car for Nancy, but friends later described how Brad limited her access to fuel for her car, which resulted in her being restricted from traveling around. To add more to her agony, Brad was monitoring her communications. He was getting copies of all of her emails and listening in on her phone calls. In 2004, Nancy gave birth to their first daughter, Bella. While motherhood brought her a great deal of joy, it also deepened her feelings of isolation. Then, in 2006, the couple welcomed their second daughter, Katie. Although Nancy adored her children, the added responsibilities at home and the lack of personal freedom contributed to the growing strain in her marriage. By 2007, the cracks in the Coopers' relationship had become evident. Nancy knew that Brad had several affairs, but when she discovered that back in 2005 he had had an affair with her friend Heather, it devastated her beyond repair. Brad did not show any kind of remorse, and instead of reconciling with Nancy, he tightened his control upon her. In 2008, Nancy's twin sister, Krista, came from Canada and visited Brad and Nancy for a few days. Krista said that there was lots of yelling and the environment was tense. Other people in their surroundings began to notice Nancy's unhappiness as well, and she confided in them about her frustrations. She told her friends that Brad was withholding her children's passports, ensuring that she could not leave the country with them. In early 2008, Nancy told her parents about her failing marriage. Nancy's parents decided to give Nancy a break from the stress, plus they wanted to see their grandkids. So, they paid for a family vacation to a beach in South Carolina from June 28th to July 5th, 2008 that included Nancy and the girls. During the vacation, Nancy's parents and siblings noticed a huge change in her demeanor. She was visibly distressed and gave more detail about the difficulties she faced at home. Nancy admitted that she and Brad were no longer sleeping in the same bedroom. She was sleeping in a locked bedroom with her daughters, and she slept with her car keys in her pocket. She kept her purse locked inside her car. Her parents asked her if she was afraid for her life. She said no, not at all. Although her sister wanted Nancy to make her marriage work, her parents had already hired a lawyer to assist with her divorce plans and offered their full support. The attorney advised Nancy to remain in the marital home because she could possibly lose everything, including her children. Nancy returned to Cary from vacation on July 9th, determined to finalize her separation from Brad. On the evening of July 11th, the Coopers attended a neighborhood party with their daughters. Witnesses observed the couple arguing before Brad left the gathering with the children, while Nancy stayed behind. Friends who saw Nancy that evening had no idea it would be the last time they would see her alive. The next morning, Nancy had plans to go to her friend Jessica's house at 8 a.m. to paint, but she never showed up. This made Jessica anxious, and she decided to call Brad, who claimed that Nancy had gone jogging with her running partner, Cary. Jessica felt something was not right since she knew that Nancy and Brad were having marital problems. Jessica spoke with Nancy's friend, Hannah, and then Jessica called the police. Jessica, some friends, and some neighbors met police officers at Brad and Nancy's home to share information with the police. Cary said that she and Nancy did not have plans to jog that morning, and that they always start the jog from a coffee shop. They never started the jog from Nancy's house, and Nancy never jogged alone. The next day, police, friends, and volunteers searched for Nancy by land, air, and water. Brad Cooper's actions during the search and investigation raised red flags. Nancy's family and friends were visibly distraught, but Brad appeared calm and detached, which raised questions. Furthermore, he avoided participating in search efforts and did not attempt to contact Nancy's family or get updates from investigators. The investigators found this highly unusual for a concerned spouse. On July 14th, a man walking his dog discovered the body of a woman floating in a drainage ditch. The location was less than 3 miles away from the Cooper's home. The body, only clothed in a sports bra and still wearing one diamond earring, was later identified as Nancy Cooper. After an expert analysis of insects found on the body, it was estimated that Nancy died between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. on July 12th. Nancy's body had been dumped in an isolated location, far from her usual jogging routes. She had not been violated sexually, so the lack of clothing suggested that the attacker had attempted to stage the scene. However, investigators believe the perpetrator's primary goal was to dispose of the body in a place that was unlikely to be discovered or searched. Nancy's family had already become suspicious of Brad, and they were worried about the safety of the children. So, on July 16th, they filed for emergency temporary custody. On this same day, detectives conducted a search of the Cooper's home. When they looked inside the garage, it was clean and organized. There was enough room to fit a car inside. However, an exterminator had visited the Cooper's home on July 9th and said that the garage was too full of toys and other items to fit a car in it. This led detectives to think it was likely that Brad moved his car into the garage to put Nancy into the trunk of his car. Detectives examined the trunk of Brad's car and discovered that he had cleaned it. Brad said that he cleaned it because he spilled gasoline in it, but there was no smell of gasoline in the trunk. When looking through the garage, detectives found 2 left jogging shoes, which caused them to conclude that Brad hastily grabbed Nancy's shoes to dispose of them, but inadvertently grabbed 2 right shoes. Detectives also found both an old and new pair of Nancy's running shoes in the Cooper's home. The shoes that Nancy normally wore while jogging were in the closet, but Brad told investigators that Nancy actually had another pair of running shoes that she was wearing that day. Detectives said that there was a shelf full of shoes in the closet, but they did not see an empty space on the shelf for a missing pair of shoes. In their search of the home, they also found her car keys and cell phone inside the house. The memorial service for Nancy was held on July 19th, but Brad did not attend the service. This led to even more suspicion. So, Nancy's family filed for permanent custody of the 2 children. On October 2nd, 2008, Brad had to give a deposition for the permanent custody case. During the deposition, he complained about Nancy's excessive drinking and excessive spending. Brad said that Nancy was never happy with anything he did. Less than a month after this deposition, Brad was arrested. On October 27th, Brad was charged with taking Nancy's life, but prosecutors decided not to seek the death penalty. The trial began on March 2011, nearly 3 years after Nancy was found. Police testified about how they performed a forensic analysis of Brad's computer and found out that on July 11th, the day before Nancy went missing, Brad had conducted a Google Maps search hours before Nancy's disappearance. This search pinpointed the exact location where her body was later found and hinted at her disappearance being pre-planned. Brad had already said in the deposition that he had never been in that area and did not know anything about the area. Investigators also scrutinized Brad's alibi. He claimed that Nancy had called him while he was at the grocery store on the morning of July 12th. Brad was seen alone on surveillance camera at the grocery store at around 6:30 a.m. purchasing milk. He returned to the same store around 6:40 a.m. to buy laundry detergent. Brad claimed that Nancy called him during his second trip to the grocery store. Brad also claimed he was at home with the children when Nancy went jogging at 7 a.m. Since witnesses reported seeing the couple arguing the night before, prosecutors reasoned that Brad had waited for Nancy to return from their neighborhood party to continue their argument. Then, in a fit of rage, he choked her and transported her body in the trunk of his car to the undeveloped site. Prosecutors also pointed out, according to Nancy's friend Jessica, decorative ducts were missing from the foyer of the Coopers' home. They alleged that the ducts were broken during the altercation. Nancy's friend also stated that Nancy never went anywhere without her diamond necklace, yet the necklace was found in the bedroom where Brad slept. Prosecutors believe that Brad kept the necklace so he could sell it. The Google Maps search and the fact that Brad was a communications technology expert and accomplished phone engineer served as strong pieces of evidence against him. It was believed that Brad faked the supposed call from Nancy to a cell phone. Brad's coworker testified that Brad borrowed a router from Cisco that was capable of making the call. Brad and the coworker even chatted about it online once. Brad took the router home and it was still missing from Cisco's inventory. To further strengthen their case, prosecutors emphasized that investigators never did find the shoes that Brad was wearing on the video from the grocery store. In addition, a geologist examined the soil on a different pair of Brad's shoes and determined that the soil contained a mineral called mica that was similar to the mineral in the soil where Nancy was found. Brad's defense was that the mineral may have gotten onto his shoes when he was out searching for Nancy. Investigators believed, however, that the mineral got on his shoes because he went to the area to check it out before taking Nancy there. Furthermore, several witnesses gave testimonies about Brad's behavior. Brad's ex-girlfriend testified that Brad was mentally cruel, and Nancy's friend, Hannah, testified about 2 lists written by Brad. Hannah said that Nancy showed her 2 disturbing lists that she found under Brad's computer keyboard. One had the names of their daughters and the girls' favorite things. The second was more of a to-do list. It included checking on wills, checking on insurance policies, and canceling accounts and services such as the exterminator. Nancy told Hannah that she believed the notes indicated that Brad was going to take his own life. Unfortunately, Nancy didn't realize that these lists and her attorney's advice to remain in the marital home highlighted the insecurity of the position she was in. On the other side, the defense claimed there was no physical evidence tying Brad to the case. First, there were no footprints matching Brad's at the site where Nancy was found. Secondly, Brad's mother testified that she saw the missing ducks in a box in the home. Thirdly, the testimonies that Nancy never went anywhere without her diamond necklace were wrong. The defense presented a video of Nancy recorded a day before she went missing, and she was not wearing the necklace. Lastly, the defense alleged that friends got together to coordinate their stories. They asserted that this was evidenced by Ricardo's police interviews. Ricardo was at the neighborhood party the night before Nancy went missing and changed his story about whether Nancy said that she was going to go jogging the following morning. Initially, Ricardo said that Nancy told him that she was going jogging the next morning.
Did she mention anything about her plans for the following day, Saturday?
Yeah, she said she was going to go jogging, to which I'm like, I could barely wake up.
And you sure she didn't say, I'm thinking about going running, or was she pretty definite that it sounded like she was planning on going running?
Yeah, it seemed like just what she did, that's what she was going to do.
2 days later, he changed his story and said that he couldn't remember if she said that she was going jogging.
But in my second interview with the police, that's one thing I wanted to go back and clarify. I couldn't say with certainty, compared to the other things in my statement, that she told me she was going to go jogging. And so at that point, I wanted to clarify that with the police, not knowing how it would affect the case either way, just making sure that if I were to be put on the stand years later, that I could with certainty say that the things I remembered, and the things that I thought I remembered was not with certainty. So that was the second interview with the police.
By changing his story, it could support the claim that Nancy did not go jogging that morning. In addition to these things, the defense said that detectives handled the case poorly altogether. For example, one of the detectives on the case kept trying to bypass the password on Nancy's phone and inadvertently erased the data on the phone. He should have allowed an expert to examine the phone instead. In another example, detectives reported that it looked like Nancy had not slept in her bed that night, although in reality, it did look like she had slept in it. The defense also argued that the Google Maps search could have been planted and pointed to infidelity on Nancy's part as a possible motive for someone else to harm her. Unbeknownst to Brad, while he was out of town on Halloween in 2005, Nancy had an affair with John, a neighbor and family friend. Although John was married, he also had a long-time affair with Heather, the same woman with whom Brad had an affair. During the trial, doubt was raised about the paternity of Nancy's second daughter because she was born 9 months after John and Nancy's one-time tryst. Despite this doubt, the defense failed to present any alternative suspects or credible explanations for the evidence against Brad. The lack of alternative suspects didn't stop the public from speculating, though. Someone started selling t-shirts with faces of possible other suspects, including Nancy's family. Then there were others who believed that Brad was framed. One woman even started a free Brad Cooper website. In the end, Bradley Cooper was found guilty. On May 11, 2011, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At first, Brad's subsequent appeals, which cited alleged procedural errors and insufficient evidence, were unsuccessful. But Brad's attorney continued to request appeals until finally, in September of 2013, a new trial was ordered, citing that testimony from 15 key witnesses had been withheld at the original trial. These witnesses claimed that they saw Nancy out jogging on July 12th and a mysterious van was following her. Nancy's family did not want to go through another trial, so Brad was allowed to plead guilty for a reduced sentence. Despite the fact that Brad entered a guilty plea, he never offered an apology or explanation. Although Nancy's mom said that she still felt empty, Nancy's father did get some satisfaction from Brad's plea. After the court hearing, he said, "When we started this process years ago, one of the first things I said was that I wished the person who was responsible for this crime would come forward and acknowledge their guilt and own up to their behavior. This happened today." Brad was sentenced to 12 to 15 years and had to agree to give up his parental rights. This allowed Nancy's twin sister to adopt Nancy's lovely daughters. This ensured that they were surrounded by a supportive and loving family. Brad was released from prison in the fall of 2020 and was deported back to Canada. He is not allowed to have contact with his daughters. Nancy Cooper's family has worked tirelessly to honor her memory and raise awareness about domestic violence. They created a domestic abuse program to help women escape abusive situations and mend their lives. It operates as an invisible program so that women can feel safe using it. If you found this case interesting, please join us for another true crime story by clicking on the video on your screen. We'll meet you over there.